Well, kia ora koutou, zhao shang hao, and good morning, everybody. It is great to be here. Can I say thank you, Fran, for the opportunity to speak at the 2025 China Business Summit. I've been coming here now for 10 years, and can I just acknowledge your tireless efforts, actually, for advocating for this relationship and getting us all here today. But as Ren said, we frankly don't have a choice not to be here today as well. Can I just acknowledge you, Ren, and Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and in particular, thank you yet again for that great gift of Tamaki Makaurau so many years ago that you generously gave us. Can I say to Charlotte Parkhill, thank you for the great work that you're doing at the Auckland Chamber as Chair. Ambassador Wang, I hope you feel incredibly proud of our recent visit and congratulations on ensuring that it was such a great success. John McKinnon, our Chair of the China Council, Warren Hu, Chair of the China Business Chamber of Commerce, our Mayor Wayne Brown is in the house, which is great. Dame Therese Walsh, who so decently and generously and awesomely leads our business delegations offshore in so many trips, including this one to China. And can I also acknowledge Todd Trade McClay. He is without doubt an outstanding Trade Minister, and I just want to say, mate, thank you for being so busy and advancing our interests and driving more trade across the world. Look, it's also fantastic to see such a strong turnout from the business leaders and business community here in New Zealand as well. And that, I think, is your presence, I think, actually just speaks volumes to the importance of the China relationship to all of us in this room, and also our shared ambition for further growth in that relationship. The summit, as Fran said, is timely because it does come just after a month after my recent visit to China to advance the relationship and to further strengthen the connections that we've built up over a number of years. With me on that visit was Minister Louise Upston and also Mark Mitchell, Nancy Liu, one of our MPs, but we also had 28 amazing business leaders. Many of them are in the room, and I would just want to say again, thank you to all of you that gave up that time and came with me. I think it was a fantastic trip. And of course, we had the outstanding 2025 Te Matatini champions, Te Kapahaka o Ngāti Whakawe, and they were absolutely amazing, putting on awesome performances as we went around Shanghai and also Beijing. But it was absolutely fantastic to be back in China. We had a packed schedule in Beijing and Shanghai, engaging in every aspect of our relationship, government to government, business to business, and people to people. And what struck me as it has on my previous visits to China, of which there have been many, both with my past life with Unilever and also with Air New Zealand, was just the sheer energy, the sheer pace, the sheer relentless drive for innovation that you see within China. So today I just do want to reflect on that mission and actually what does it mean for New Zealand going forward. Well, global trade and investment, as Fran alluded to, are mission critical to New Zealand's success. And that's actually why it's one of the 5 big pillars in our Going for Growth plan. We're a smart country that succeeds when we're connected to the world and can build scale and productivity. And that's how we grow our incomes, that's how we create jobs, and that's how we actually fund our future world-class public services. New Zealand's economy is built on exports, from our food and fibre producers to tourism to education and high-value tech and manufacturing, and we need to produce goods and services that customers want to buy. We simply can't get rich just selling to ourselves, and that's why we have a clear target, and that target is ambitious, but it is to double the value of New Zealand's exports by 2034. We want to be backing our exporters every step of the way by making it easier to do business, breaking down the barriers to overseas markets, and attracting high-quality investment that we need to lift productivity here at home. Now, it's certainly a much more contested and complex world. New Zealand's global reputation, I think, matters more than ever. People want to buy from us, they want to partner with us, they want to invest here, they want to study here because we're trusted, because we're reliable, and because we're safe. And as a government, we can create the conditions for growth, but it's actually you in this room as business leaders that are actually creating that economic growth through your innovation, through your ideas, and through your execution. As Fran said as well, China is a vital part of New Zealand's economic story, and it is a key partner in our pursuit of growth, resilience, and opportunity. Two-way trade now tops $39 billion. More than 20% of our exports go to China, worth over $21.5 billion. That's built on the foundations of our successful FTA agreement from 2008 and again upgraded in 2022. And also want to acknowledge Damien O'Connor and your role in that relationship as well. But it's also reinforced through the commitment that we have, shared commitment between China and New Zealand to the regional comprehensive economic partnership as well. New Zealanders are particularly known as a trusted supplier of safe, high-quality food and beverage products, and we're well positioned to meet the growing demand from China's rapidly expanding and highly discerning middle class, and it numbers now 500 million people. So especially in premium and niche segments that support modern, healthy lifestyles, we have some fantastic opportunities. And I have to say our business community isn't taking that position for granted. Yes, China is fast moving. Yes, it's a very competitive market. But I'd say the Kiwi businesses that I saw on the ground in Shanghai and Beijing are agile, they're customer focused, and they're ambitious. And I left China super impressed by the knowledge of the markets by our New Zealand exporters, but also by the quality of their Chinese joint venture partners as well. More than $1 billion worth of deals were actually signed across a range of sectors over a 3-day period, and that was a strong signal of momentum in our trade relationship and a testament, I think, to the innovation and the quality of our exporters and their partners. As a government, we're doing all that we can to support that success. I think our visit strengthened the connections and relationships at the highest levels, and we know that that helps pave the way for our businesses. And in Beijing, we signed new government-to-government arrangements to make trade faster, to make it smoother and more predictable, because it's actually all about removing the friction and backing Kiwi businesses then to get on with the job. And that included things like a new customs pilot to speed up border clearance for air-freighted fresh food, so New Zealand's top-quality seafood and meat and dairy and fruit can land in China and be on supermarket shelves or restaurant menus that same day. We've also rolled out a new certification scheme that opens the door for New Zealand's cosmetics and skincare products and brands to reach shelves across China. And that's estimated to be worth about $200 million for New Zealand exporters as we get more of our high-quality, innovative products in front of Chinese consumers in store as well as online. But of course, our trading relationship with China goes well beyond just goods. Education remains a major pillar, and while student numbers sit at 67% of pre-COVID levels, China is still our largest source of international students, and I'm determined to lift those numbers even higher. At Fudan University in Shanghai, one of China's top academic institutions, I promoted New Zealand as a world-class destination for study and for research, and we're proud of the partnerships that our respective institutions have built over time, and I want to see them continue to go from strength to strength as well. And just an example of the power of these people-to-people connections is Ma Boyong. I spent time with him in Shanghai last month and heard his story. He came from China, he studied at Waikato University, and then returned to China where he's written 22 books, many of which have been turned into TV shows and movies. And he just talked about the many gifts that New Zealand education and our people had given him and had laid the foundation for his future success. So it's important education. It drives that people-to-people connection really well. Tourism obviously is another key part of our partnership, and China is now New Zealand's third largest market with almost 250,000 arrivals over the past year. And we're seeing some really encouraging signs of recovery. Holiday arrivals are up 31%, and visitor spending has jumped, though, 147% over the year to January 2025. But we know there's a lot more for us to do in tourism. So we listened to the tourism sector and we simplified our visa settings, making it easier for Chinese travellers to choose New Zealand. So for example, we will now allow Chinese passport holders travelling from Australia with a valid Australian visitor visa, student or family visa to visit New Zealand for up to 3 months. And then we've also removed visa document translation certification and fees as well. And I have to say, Fran, after first talking about something called the Southern Link back in May 2019 here at this very forum, this idea that we can actually link the economic powerhouses of China with South America through New Zealand, it was fantastic to be able to make progress in that regard as well. And I was particularly pleased to see that we have been able to improve our transit visa settings for Chinese nationals, supporting the use of New Zealand airports as transit hubs, enabling greater air connectivity, more travellers, and more cargo capacity for growing Kiwi businesses. And that decision was deliberately made in sync, having secured China Eastern's commitment to fly from Shanghai to Buenos Aires through Auckland. We're backing our exporters, we're backing our educators and our tourism operators to seize these opportunities, creating jobs and lifting incomes in communities all across New Zealand in the process. In the second half of this year, you'll see more of my ministers travelling to China to promote our education, tourism and trade interests and to continue to deepen the relationship at the top-to-top level. There is no doubt about it. We are trying to grow New Zealand's economy in an environment that is increasingly turbulent and uncertain. And to have a future-ready economy, ready to meet both challenges and opportunities, we do need to broaden our base of trade and investment opportunities offshore. But I want to be very clear, that's the thinking behind our China and approach. China is a key economic partner for New Zealand. We are committed to growing and deepening that relationship. There is so much more to do together. And at the same time, we will continue to build new relationships around the world as well. And that, I have to say up front, isn't about choosing one market over another. That's not what this is about. It's just the acknowledgement that as a small trading nation where 1 in 4 of our jobs are tied to trade, it's about creating every possible market option that we can for our New Zealand businesses and for our exporters. Because when we have more options, our firms have more market power, we reduce risk, we lift our economic resilience, and we obviously create more opportunities for growth and high-value jobs here at home. Our bilateral ties with any nation actually sit within a much broader international context, one that is shifting rapidly, as you will have seen this year, and becoming more contested. New Zealanders sometimes like to think that we are insulated by geography from the world, but the reality is there is no sitting on the sidelines when it comes to today's strategic challenges. And against this backdrop, the government is bringing new energy, urgency and focus to New Zealand's foreign policy. New Zealand has agency and it has influence in actively pursuing its interests. And it's not just a case of hoping for the best or clinging onto an out-of-date vision of how the world used to be. We are building and we are reinforcing a range of constructive relationships where we cooperate on areas of national interest and also engage on points of differences in all of our bilateral relationships. This is exactly how I do approach all my relationships with the different leaders I engage with, including my discussions with President Xi and Premier Li. I was clear about our shared interests and our common commitments to a stable, productive and mutually beneficial relationship, just as we are also upfront about our differences. We collaborate across such a range of areas that deliver real outcomes for both of our countries and our citizens, from agriculture and education to health to biomedical science to climate change and to conservation. These are practical partnerships that reflect our shared interests. And where we have differences with China, we'll always promote and protect New Zealand's interests through engagement and through dialogue. China's views and actions really matter because as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, the world's second largest economy, and in being a key global partner, China's influence is undeniable. And that's why it's always so vital that we can engage and deepen dialogue on important issues to both of us. New Zealand has a promising road ahead, and China will remain a very important part of that story. It is a market that continues to create opportunities for Kiwi firms, exporters and innovators. We've made real progress together, and now's the time to continue building on that momentum, unlocking more Chinese cities and more Chinese consumers. We'll continue working closely with China, strengthening and building on a resilient and growing relationship that delivers for both of our citizens. So I think let's celebrate what we've achieved and let's set our sights even higher. Can I say to all of you in the room, thank you very much for all your drive, for your ambition and for your belief in what New Zealand can offer the world. That's what will help us grow stronger, more resilient and more successful together. Xie. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister has generously agreed to take some questions from the floor, so please get cracking on Slido.
I thought this was my Oprah interview with Fran O'Sullivan.
Enough of that. Yeah. I don't think I'm ever going to live that down, Prime Minister, but never mind. Hey, in the room, finally, with the President and the Premier. I mean, you've been part of the business delegation over many years, watching John Key and others. Yeah. Tell us a little, share us a wee bit that you can without breaking confidentiality.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's really important that you can establish really good, personal relationships or relationships with the leaders of any countries. But, President Xi's someone I first met back, I think, in 2015 when he came and visited New Zealand, when I was with you actually on the New Zealand-China Council. Incredibly smart, incredibly thoughtful, very clear about what he's wanting to achieve with China and its own domestic agenda around its economy and its growth as well. Premier Li obviously came out to New Zealand last year. We had a very good personal connection and personal relationship as well. And he very generously hosted us a wonderful state dinner at the end of our trip, which was marvellous. And so, I think those relationships at the top to top level really matter. And that's part of my job as Prime Minister, is to make sure that, just if you back up a little bit, New Zealand trade with China is 0.3%. Ambassador, I think we are your 42nd or 43rd biggest trading partner with 0.3% of all of your trade. And so the opportunity for us is actually to say, well, if you could get it from 0.3 to 0.4, you've actually grown our business 25%. So that's why I say to all New Zealand businesses, when you're thinking about China, it is a really big market. And for us to be able to have a connection at the top to top level and to have share of mind and to raise the profile of New Zealand in domestic China is actually really important. So, that's why I was so excited about the trip and being able to get up there and continue to build those relationships as we've done.
Yeah, you have, I guess, what's been described as a transactional style. You very much put your hustle on. You're very determined to get gains for New Zealand during your period as Prime Minister, for the many years ahead, of course. So just walk us through a little bit of that softer side of you that we don't really see when you're very focused on the big gains.
Well, I think it's no different from how you approach all of your relationships. I think everything in life actually comes down to relationships at the base. And I think, I see my job as Prime Minister is to build rapport, genuine relationship with these leaders. I don't want it just to be a box-ticking exercise, another visit that they're enduring, or, we actually need to build connection. And actually, in the case of both President Xi, Premier Li, different personalities, but, interesting people, and if you can build a connection with them, I think it actually helps to be able to then pick up the phone when you need to be able to pick up the phone and have those conversations. So, every leader's got a different personality. My job is to build relationship. Why is that important? Because once you've got relationships in life, and then you start to talk about the opportunities and the possibilities of what you might do together, then you put together the plans, and then you ultimately get bigger results. So I've always been a big believer, the bigger the relationships, the bigger the results. And if it's just purely transactional, that doesn't get you places. We've actually build rapport and relationships, as we've been doing over the last 18 months, is really important.
You talked about ministers going up, obviously Louise Upston on tourism. Who else will go up, and what are you hoping to get out of those missions? Yeah,
look, I mean, we've had obviously a constant, actually since we came to government 18 months ago, I mean, we obviously hosted Premier Li down here. That was a very successful visit. Winston and Todd have obviously been there both in a foreign affairs and trade sense, and will continue to do that. But also, Louise Upston with respect to, tourism, Erica Stanford with respect to international education, Mark Mitchell was there in his ethnic communities piece, but we also do good collaboration in some of the policing spaces as well, particularly on transnational crime, which is important for us to continue that work as well. So I just want to see an all-of-government approach where we actually have a good number of ministers cycling through China. And it's really important because I've probably been going to China since the early, mid-1990s when I was in my early 20s. And, it's a place that's changed, as you would all know, so dramatically. And it's actually a place where you need to be going through. And I went to Shanghai this time and met with the party secretary there. Incredibly impressive individual, very executive, understood what the strategy was, the business strategy, economic strategy was for Shanghai. But if I think about Shanghai in 1995 and I think about Shanghai in 2025, I think we need to keep building our literacy and fluency of that market, and part of it is having a regular diet of ministers getting exposed and understanding China, and it's through understanding you're understood.
What's your view on how China is powering ahead on technology?
Oh, it's impressive. It's very, very impressive. There's no doubt about it. There are some real areas of expertise, as you're seeing across, that's coming through some world-class universities, amazing research programs, and then obviously being able to convert that technology. If you look at, electric vehicles, if you look at some of the spaces and chips, there's just huge progress happening in that space. And I think, that's important, right? And we've been talking about that just in a New Zealand sense, is that, we need to adopt a lot more technology, science, innovation into our system as well, because that's ultimately how we're going to get some of those productivity gains that we're so desperately looking for as well. But it's just inspiring, very inspiring, and very, very, set a long-term vision and chunk it down into bite-sized bits. And as a former CEO, I kind of like that model and approach. It's something that we've been less comfortable with, I guess, in New Zealand, but I actually think is quite necessary for the future.
So how will you roll it out here? that way?
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, one of our 5 pillars of our own Going for Growth plan is embracing more science, technology, innovation. We'll be making an announcement this morning, actually, about some of our thinking around work on AI and how we might advance that here in New Zealand. But we have to embrace a lot more of it, certainly in a government sense as well. If we could digitise government, if we could use AI and a bunch of technology in a different way, that would be really important for us as well.
Can you just share with us the headline takeout for the AI announcement?
No, I'll let Shane Retty talk about that in about an hour and a half's time. But
Okay.
but suffice to say, as you know, we're reorganising our science sector so that we get better join up between our universities, our institutes, and also our businesses.
Okay.
And that's a key part of it.
Okay, we have a question from Jason Wong from Icehouse Ventures. Can we see your support extended to help New Zealand's tech companies, especially in sustainable tech, expand into China for its green transition?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. I mean, I think there's huge areas of collaboration already in the relationship on climate change and the transition. There's actually quite complementary skills and technologies on both sides, and that's something that I certainly would encourage anyone and entrepreneurs wanting to get into it. There's a lot that we can do in that regard.
Yeah, and also then, how from Cleo Gilmore, how is the government fostering non-commercial ties in education, culture and science? And that's to ensure resilient engagement beyond economics.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I sort of had 3 objectives of this trip, which was 1, the government to government, leader to leader sort of core relationships, to continue to build and deepen those relationships so that we can, as I said, be able to pick up the phone and talk difficult issues through really well. We've obviously got the business to business side, which is very economic, but the people to people side is really important. And it's not just an afterthought. It is actually, I think, where things start. It is actually through the people to people connections that you build familiarity with each other. You actually understand each other. And from there, as I said, you start to discuss other things that you can do. So I've always believed flows of trade and capital investment actually follow after we've established the people-to-people connections, either through tourism, education, cultural exchanges. All of those things are really important. So it's not that one's quantitative and one's qualitative. It's actually the relational bit actually does set up the growth side later.
Yeah, another question from Jason Wong. Will you consider easing the new investor visa rules to allow more investors from China, especially those backing the tech sector?
Yeah, I'd just say, what's been really impressive is that you might remember we had some settings around what we called active investor visas. They were sort of turned off. We've changed that around a little bit. In the first 2 months of the data I saw, we had more people coming through what was called the golden visa than we had in the previous 2.5 years. And whether they come from China or from Europe or from North America, we're opening to encouraging that active investment into New Zealand. What we want to see is investment in productive assets in the country, and that's why we've got the 3 million option and the 5 million option and the pathway to residencies 5 million option, $10 million option over 3 to 5 years, and that's been really, really successful. So at this stage, there's nothing further that we've been discussing in terms of those visa settings, but to say we want to encourage people who might have connections in China or Europe or North America to actually encourage their friends and partners to think about maybe using that visa option would be great.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Frankie Wong. Absolutely, always a participant. He talks about fantastic effort and successful delegation to China, Prime Minister. He makes the point that Anthony Albanese is currently visiting China and there are key sectors competing with New Zealand. What's our point of difference?
Well, we're just better than the Australians, let's be clear. We don't lose to Australians ever, at home or abroad, so it's pretty simple. So look, I mean, it was interesting, actually. The red meat sector was quite interesting. I actually think, obviously, the red meat sector has built a big business in North America, and particularly the US, but there's also huge opportunities in China, and what we heard in China was actually our product is the best in the world, and we probably need to do a better job in our marketing story relative to the Australians than what they had been doing. And actually, frankly, with Nathan Guy and Dan and others from Silver Fern and other places, they've done a brilliant job of actually starting that work over the last 18 months. So, look, I think we've got a unique story. I think actually a New Zealand story of local provenance, just the Kiwi way in which we engage with our partners is different, and actually you could feel it up there. And so I think we got very good share of mind for New Zealand, both in a number of sectors while we were up there.
Question about security and defence ties with the US, and the question asks, could the government's efforts to build closer security and defence ties with the US jeopardise our relationship with China, and how will you manage that?
Yeah, look, I've seen commentary from former politicians and stuff, and that's lovely. But that's from the world's moved on in 20 to 30 years. As a result, we're in a very challenging environment, as you know, a very uncertain, volatile sort of environment globally. I think New Zealand, as a small country, wants to have strong relationships with everybody. I think the important piece is that we actually have very good clarity around the fact that we can't have prosperity if we don't have security. These issues are now linked. You can't have them in separate buckets like we've previously done. But importantly, we can have great we can have great relationships with China and with the US at the same time, and I think those are important. So we'll continue to advance our own interests. Our own interests are economic, they're security. And we have an independent foreign policy for a good reason, but so do 195 other countries, frankly. And so we make our own assessment on the challenges that we see in the world in a defence security sense, in a trade and economic sense. As you know, we're a big upholder of the international rules-based system. We keep advocating for that position very strongly, whether it's with all countries, frankly, on all sides.
Yeah, I mean, you went on to NATO post-China. Can you just sort of share a little bit about the atmosphere there, and obviously great pressure on those particular allies to increase defence spend, and Anthony Albanese came under a bit of pressure while in his own visit from the US about needing to up spending. Are we immune from that?
Well, I mean, our position has been, obviously there's a whole bunch of geopolitics going on in New Zealand, around the world, but New Zealand actually has to work out how it's going to sail its own boat through those choppy seas. And then we made our own assessment that we want to double our defence expenditure, in part because it had been run down over successive decades, recent decades actually. And so we actually want to make sure we do that job. We've got a responsibility in the Pacific, for example. We have a huge responsibility around emergency relief often. That means we've got to have kit, we've got to have a defence force that's able to respond to that. But look, I mean, from our partners, in a defence sense, they respect the fact that we're making a big step up in our own commitment and in our own way, which is important. And I think that's important. New Zealand can't just be the country that goes around sort of espousing its views and just verbalising. It actually has to follow up with actions. And so when you see something like North Korea providing munitions to Russia to fight a war in Ukraine with UN sanctions, New Zealand can make lovely statements about it and issue PRs and write open letters and do all sorts of things. But actually, you've got to follow it up. So we've actually doubled our commitment with our P8 assets of reconnaissance flights and enforcing UN sanctions, working with 11 other countries on that challenge. That's the kind of thing that we should be doing. With respect to NATO and Europe, my takeaway from that was just, when you've got a war in Europe like Ukraine, it was completely focused on Ukraine in particular, and just how does that conflict get resolved, and the instability that has caused throughout Western and Central Europe is quite profound. So, that was really the major focus this year at the NATO conversation. And that's, we go there as an IP4 set of countries, just because there are, and as we should, because as a small country, we should be able to have relationships with lots of different people to try and get a sense of how they're thinking about things in the Euro-Atlantic region, and obviously how we think about some things in the Indo-Pacific region.
Did you get a sense that the war might spread?
The Ukraine war? Look, I don't think so. I think, that the reality is pretty simple. Russia needs to commit to an immediate ceasefire. They could do that tomorrow. And then we need to have there needs to be peace and negotiation, and more military action just doesn't get you anywhere, as we're seeing in the Middle East and as we're seeing in Ukraine. And they are two massive conflicts that, we actually need diplomacy, we need dialogue, we need tough conversations, and the regional partners and actors in those close to those conflicts, are doing everything they can. But, Russia's pretty simple. It's an illegal, immoral war. We're a big country, disrespected the sovereign borders of another nation, and we stand with Ukraine. And I met with President Zelensky, probably spoke to him 7 or 8 times, met with him personally several times, and I have huge admiration for what he's doing. He's standing up for values that New Zealand actually believes in, and actually, when you've got I think I said to you, Fran, when I was in the UK earlier in the year, I was really, really moved actually by the fact that we had been working with the Brits training 54,000 Ukrainian soldiers. And I met this 37-year-old guy from Ukraine. He couldn't speak English. Through translators, he's 37 years old. He's a chef. He had been sent to fight on the trenches. He'd managed to survive. He then got promoted to be a sergeant. He was doing some more training with the New Zealanders and the Brits down in the south of England. And then he was heading out in 3 days' time. And probably 30% of the 170 Ukrainian soldiers I met, who were just people doing regular day jobs now, who are on the front line, standing up for the values that we believe in, were going to die. And so, it was pretty sobering when you think about your values getting translated into actions, and that's why you've got to follow that through and back it up with proper action, not just words.
Thank you. On another question from Mark Piper, who was on the mission, as you know, was there anything you saw in China which stood out as an opportunity that we should be working in, but we're not strong in at the moment?
I have to say I was really genuinely super impressed with the knowledge of the Chinese market and consumer from the New Zealand businesses that I was with. It was really inspiring, actually. In my former life at Unilever, I used to rock around the world, and you'd go into a country and you'd be quizzing a chairman and a CEO about what they knew about their business and how it was going. And honestly, the sophistication, the literacy, the understanding of the market by our CEOs and their senior teams was unbelievably brilliant. It was so inspiring, gave me so much confidence about it. But the other thing I observed, having been to China for a number of years, is there's a new generation of business leadership that's coming through on the Chinese side as well. And they're incredibly dynamic, articulate, sophisticated, and very keen to partner with New Zealand firms, and really good partners as well. So I was really impressed with that whole dynamic. So I think for us, it's about, you've got 220 cities in China that are 1 million people or more. We tend to focus a lot on Shanghai as our commercial centre, or maybe Guangzhou. You've got a country there with 500 million middle-class people living a middle-class standard of life. Huge opportunity. You've got an economy growing at 5% a year, which is adding essentially an Argentinian economy to it every single year, which is huge. And we, as I said, we are 0.3% of Ambassador Wong's trade, which is very nice. But so it all comes back to execution, and the danger is you can get very bored and you end up going off on excursions that take you away from your core strategy, and having a very simple strategy about how you're going to unlock and create value in that market is really important. So there's more cities, there's more consumer niches to understand, and I think it's about continuing to deepen the core business forever. There's just endless opportunity as more and more people are brought into the middle class. And you can listen to economists all day long about a slowdown in China and whatever, but man, that's a country that for the next 100 years it's got a pathway of growth, and we should be right in there and building and deepening our sophistication as we've been doing.
Yeah, one quick last question. Why can't you make us more competitive as a visitor destination? $441 to enter the country for a Chinese visitor does not encourage growth.
Well, I'd just say to you, I think when you've had 147% growth in the value of Chinese spending here in New Zealand tourism market, that's pretty good progress. I take the point, yes, but I'd just say to you also, we know it's about 60 million Chinese that are actively considering a trip to New Zealand, and our job is actually not is not to deal with, yes, I appreciate people might think $441 is high. By the time that's converted into Chinese yuan, by the time you actually think about the customer that you want to be able to bring to New Zealand, there is plenty of wealthy customers in China. When you've got 500 million in the middle class, our issue has actually been about marketing and awareness of New Zealand within China, and the choices that they have and get to make about whether it's going to be Thailand or Singapore or Japan or New Zealand as their next destination. So I think our challenge is actually a marketing one, not actually an issue around the visa fees per se.
Okay. Please join me in thanking the Prime Minister, and thank you for being so frank.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.